Mom, I'm up in the attic. Have you seen the basket? The one with my hat? I'll keep looking. Imagine my great-great-great-grandmother Eleanor putting on her hand-knit shawl, walking with purpose to the Seneca Falls Methodist Church in summer of 1848. Inside, Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton were talking. They were speaking out, taking a stand for their rights as humans. I imagined my grandmother taking everything in, knowing she had found a place among friends. Did she realize the stand she was taking, how it would influence women for decades? Not only were women banding together, organizing for the first time, by doing so they were leaving a legacy. Stanton declared, "We hope this conference will be followed by a series of conferences embracing every part of this country." These conventions, which continued for years to come, were the first places where women could band together and crusade for their cause. In the small, progressive town of Seneca Falls, suffrage was born. A mere 3 years later, a handshake changed the world. Elizabeth Cady Stanton met Susan B. Anthony. A friendship bloomed, and the two became the face and voice of the suffrage movement. In 1868, they founded The Revolution, a weekly newspaper. Its motto, developed on the surface of Susan B. Anthony's desk. Men, their rights, nothing more. Women, their rights, nothing less. Eleanor, subscriber and avid reader of the paper, saved this for her family for generations. 12 months later, the real revolution began. Susan and Elizabeth founded the National Women's Suffrage Association. NAWSA, as the organization was known, was the driving force that acted on the principles brought up at Seneca Falls, the principles of suffrage and equal rights. Starting in 1871, NAWSA encouraged all its members to vote in the following election. Women successfully registered under the immense scrutiny from the men running the polling places. This was a momentous stand for women everywhere. Miss Anthony herself voted, and 5 hours later, she was arrested. She demanded that the officer put her in handcuffs. When tried unfairly in court, her words rang out, "I am degraded from the status of a citizen to that of a subject, and not only myself individually, but all of my gender." Elizabeth and Susan may have never seen their final victory for suffrage, but their stand, their lives, and all the women's lives they affected, their legacy, was left in good hands of Alice Paul and the Progressive Era. Look at this. Alice Paul and Ava Belmont standing around Susan B. Anthony's old desk. Great-great-aunt Emma must be in this crowd somewhere. Here is her journal. Susan sits at Susan B. Anthony's old desk and says it speaks to her. But what does it say? "March," it whispers. "Take a stand. Organize. March." She wanted something big, a spectacle. Alice wanted a parade in Washington, D.C., a day before President Wilson's inauguration. The National Suffrage Association agreed, and on March 3rd, 1913, 8,000 courageous women walked in support of suffrage. Hand in hand, banners and word of mouth carried the message. Women warranted the right to vote. Justice, atop a white stallion, led the procession, until the parade turned onto Pennsylvania Avenue. Onlookers, mainly men, both verbally and physically abused the marchers while police officers looked on. The parade ended in a bloody fray, but the march brought the message to the front page. Parade struggles to victory, despite disgraceful scenes. "I feel as if I am invested for life," one suffragette wrote. The Progressive Era was the time for women to rise. They became activists, social reformers, and journalists outside of their life at home. In 1917, Alice Paul and the newly formed National Women's Party set out to change the future. Suffragists, known as the Silent Sentinels, stood guard outside the White House. Teams of women lined the gates every single day. Aunt Emma was a sentinel and a member of the NWP. Her knit scarf protected her from the cold, but not from controversy. Their stand was made without a sound ever being uttered. However, on August 20th, 1917, picketers on duty were arrested, thrown into a truck, and sent to Occoquan Workhouse, a prison in Virginia. This was the first arrest of suffragists in the U.S. Alice and other NWP members were furious. Alice Paul soon joined her comrades at the prison. While incarcerated, the suffragists led a hunger strike. Lucy Burns and Alice Paul were even force-fed, using tubes through their nostrils to send raw eggs to their stomachs. This was not just taking a stand for their cause, they were willing to die for their cause. Some, including Alice, were sent to a psych ward, believed to have mental disabilities. Aunt Emma wrote her way through this experience. She said, women come up to me and say, "How I admire your courage." What is courage? Is it sitting here at St. Elizabeth's? I don't know if I possess courage any longer. It is dangerous, refusing to eat, but it is more dangerous not to fight as my right as a citizen. I suppose that if wanting voting equality is defined as courage and bravery, I am filled to my soul with it. After months of grueling labor and starvation, suffragists were released from prison in March of 1918. Later that year, President Wilson endorsed suffrage as a war measure. On August 26, 1920, the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was ratified. It became known as the Susan B. Anthony Amendment. Women now had the right to vote. It was not won by the men who voted for it. It was not won by the majority. The vote was won through the suffragists, women who walked for the vote, stood for the vote, starved for the vote. The vote was won through the women who, generations before, had dedicated their lives for the vote. Alice had gotten her vote, yes, but she nor her legacy would be satisfied until equality prevailed in her beloved country. In 1923, she proposed the Lucretia Mott Amendment, what we now know as the ERA. ERA stated that civil rights may not be denied on the basis of one's sex. It means that no matter your background, your race, religion, or gender, you deserve equal and just rights. It is a stand for equality. Alice introduced the amendment, and the name was officially changed to honor her in 1943. The women's movement was evolving. It transitioned its stand from suffrage to equal rights. It was in the 1960s when the stand for the ERA truly began. This was Gloria Steinem and Betty Friedan's decade. The second wave was publicized by the radicals. Gloria Steinem revolutionized journalism through her daring exposés and her power with words. Betty Friedan led the working mother to a revelation that yes, you can be a mother, a job holder, and still be a feminist. Organizations such as the National Women's Political Caucus hoped that women and young girls knew that our place was in the House and the Senate. I remember my grandmother talking to me about marching for the Equal Rights Amendment, showing me her poncho and her poster in turn. There was nothing quite like being surrounded by people who are making history. That's when it hits you, my dear. You have the revelation when you are in the middle of the street, signs crowding the air and love and defiance in your heart. That's when it hits you. That's when you realize you are a part of history. And by telling you, I suppose I still am. I'll never forget the moment she said that. My grandmother was a member of the National Organization for Women, or NOW. NOW was formed on June 30th, 1966. Its purpose? To bring women into the full stream of American society now, exercising all privileges and responsibilities thereof in full and equal partnership with men. NOW pushed for the ERA to be heard by Congress, even interrupting their meetings. Finally, in June 1970, the discharge petition was approved thanks to Michigan Senator Martha Griffiths. 1 year later, the Senate approved the ERA, and a time limit of 7 years for ratification was set. In 1979, Alice Paul died and never saw her amendment ratified. In 1982, the Equal Rights Amendment fell 3 states short of ratification. Alice Paul has yet to realize her dream of the ERA, but her stand is still being shared by millions of women, past and present, who have pushed for equality. My ancestors fought in turn for women's rights. Great-great-great-great-grandmother Eleanor and her shawl for suffrage. Great-great-aunt Emma the same, but in the progressive era and with her knitted scarf. My grandmother and her poncho in the 20th century for equality. And my mother teaching me that women are agents of change. We are drivers of progress. We are makers of peace. All we need is a fighting chance. Now, me, what do I fight for? What has the women's movement done for me that makes it worth standing for? It has stood for me. It has created my past, present, and future. I fight for myself as a girl. I fight for my country because all in America deserve equal and just rights. I fight for my future, a future that includes women. As we all know, a woman's work is never done. It's my turn to take a stand. Thank you.